right, thank you so much for being with us at this screen share, and we're now going to enter the workshop portion. So as you notice, our webcams are not quite as nice quality as that was. We had to pre-record some of that, but this is all live. We're here, living our best quarantine lives. So my name is Joshua Dance. I'm the Director of Product at Grow, and so in this workshop, we're going to be hearing from Jason, one of our product managers, and also Juliet, one of our product managers. So let me share my screen real quick and we can get started. So we're going to cover in this 2 workshops, and we're going to cover 4 different things. We're going to cover how to connect your data, how to build and prep a data set, then how to use Data Explorer to explore and visualize and then share and operationalize that data. We're super excited for you to hear all about this Grow 6 release, especially because these key benefits are huge. So obviously Grow 6 makes it easier to have all your data in Grow. It gives more power to the analysts, but also easier use for the business user. Also, it makes it much faster to get to insights and ask and answer questions. Anyone can ask and answer their own questions using Data Explorer and dashboard filtering. Much less SQL is required, and the whole company can get the data they need. Quick housekeeping note, this is live, so please ask questions. I'll be answering them and also be turning the questions over to our presenters live if they're really good or pertinent to what they're talking about. And you have access to all these features right now in your account. So we're super excited to jump into this. So I'm going to give a presentation over to Jason, and we're going to start. So Jason, I got a question for you. So Jason is half, or I guess he's Italian American, right? He used to live in Italy. And so my question for you, Jason, is what is your favorite Italian food? Oh, can't quite hear you, Jason. We got to make sure your mic is on. Remember, this is live, so we're working through this.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. So what's your favorite Italian food, Jason?
Yeah, so I did live in Italy for a couple of years and got to travel to a couple of different areas. And I'm actually Italian American. My mom's from Turin, and I loved Tuscany the best. I got to live in Florence for a little while, but the best food by far is down in Naples, southern Italy. They have my particular favorite piece is buffalo mozzarella, which kind of sounds a little weird, but it's actually very delicious, especially on a nice margarita Italian pizza, just sitting in some piazza. So I love it. It's great.
That's awesome. And if you hear the melodious sounds of violin in the background of Jason, his wife is also a violin teacher, and he's living his best quarantine life, holed up in his bedroom right now. So, but we're making it work. So, Jason, you want to talk to us about the data warehouse and how we can use that in Grow 6?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started. So connecting your data, we kind of talked through that connecting your data is like the first step. And so what this looks like for us is the data management and data warehouse now. So we want to talk through a little bit of the work that we've been doing around data warehousing, and then also how you can manage that data within Grow. So as we were working on these particular features, we had some very specific benefits and goals that we wanted to target. So let me just go through these really quickly. Our first goal was data visibility. And for this, we wanted to make sure it was very clear what data you had and how much data you had in Grow, but also like when that data updated last. And also if there was any issue in your account, then you could proactively fix it and move forward so your account could continue to move smoothly. Our next goal was a simplified experience. We wanted to simplify how you connect and manage your data. Next is data capacity. We wanted the warehouse to go and get all of your data and put it into one place. Next is performance. Having data in the warehouse allowed us to get performance gains in the builder and on the dashboard that we weren't able to get previously. And finally, a foundation for growth. We knew that the warehouse was going to be a key feature in order to enable your organizations as you became more sophisticated in your data needs, and also for Grow to essentially be the foundation for the next suite of features within Grow. So let's go through each of these one at a time. So data visibility. So like I said before, there were a couple of questions that we wanted to be able to answer with the data visibility and data management in the warehouse. And those questions are like, what data do I have connected in Grow and how much? What issues do I need to address? So as you saw in the keynote, we've made some recent additions to the data management tab to give you a clear view of what data you have in Grow, and if there's anything you need to address to keep your account running smoothly. So let's quickly look at that. So here we have the data overview page, which is a high-level overview of all of your data in Grow. We even rank for you your connections and your data sets by the ones you most use in your account. And we also give you some metrics to show you the data that we've refreshed for you and the data that you're storing over time. Next, we have the needs attention page. This page is a quick way to see any issues you can proactively address to keep your account running smoothly. Looks like I have no issues.
Speaking of issues, Jason, I need to cut in real quick. We're having a few people report they have a black screen. If you can hear me but have a black screen, refresh and go to webinar should fix itself. We're sorry about that. If you can hear me and you have a black screen, just do a quick refresh. So yeah, I had to deal with that needs attention, but back to you, Jason.
Yeah. Now let's go over to the next part of the data management page that we've added. So we have two new additions to the data management tab for Grow 6, and this is the warehouse and files section. So looking at those in Grow, if I click over here in the left-hand nav, I can see warehouses. Here you can see each table that we're storing for you inside of Grow. You can see the name, the data source it came from, the number of rows that we're storing for you, and when it was last updated. So one of our main goals with Grow's data warehouse was to make it absolutely clear when your data was updated last. We know that currently in Grow, when data refreshed last is not always clear, especially when you have a metric built on multiple layers of data sets. Now with the warehouse, we can be very precise and accurate and show you when that data was last updated. Next, clicking on files, you see a similar experience and overview for the files. It's important to note here that you will only see files that you connect to through this data management tab moving forward. And that's data visibility. Now let's talk through the simplified experience for connecting and warehousing your data within Grow. So currently, we require you to fill out these long forms, these pick lists and dropdowns to even get data into Grow. Not only that, but you have to do this every single time you connect to a metric or a data set where you want that data. But now we've simplified this experience down to a simple one-time toggle. And let me show you what that looks like in Grow. So coming back over here to the data management tab, I'm going to come over here to connections. And many of you already have your data connection to Grow. So I'm going to show you an existing connection I have right here, my Salesforce. Drilling into this, I get to the connections details page, and you can see here that there's a new table called warehouse tables. And getting warehouse data into Grow for this connection is as easy as coming here and clicking manage connection. Now this opens our brand new connection experience with the simple toggles that I just showed you. In addition to that, we've simplified it by grouping these toggles into 3 sections. So let me talk through those really quick. This first section is the suggested tables. We've seen hundreds of our customers connect to each of these data sources. And by getting all of that information, we can now create smart defaults and suggest to you what data you probably want to pull in for this data source. And for Salesforce, these are the data points. So I'm going to connect to accounts, contacts, leads, and opportunities. Next, we have this other tables section. So as great as smart defaults are, a lot of us have custom data that we need to connect to. And in this case, for Salesforce, that can be either a custom object or some less used standard objects. Let's say for my example, I need users. That's something that is important to me. I'm gonna just come here, filter this list down to users, and here it is. I'm gonna toggle that one on as well. Now, even with these suggested tables, the other tables for some of your more custom data, sometimes you just need that one extra layer of granularity for what data you want to pull in. So that's why we have custom tables. Clicking here will actually open up a distinctive modal that's unique to each data source. For our case in Salesforce, this is a SOQL editor. So I can just type in any custom SOQL query here and save it, and it'll store it into the warehouse. For our example today, I actually don't need anything, so I'm going to exit out of here. And I'm going to now take all of my data that I've selected
Quick
and
question,
sync
Jason.
and store this to the warehouse. Yeah.
So we just had a user ask, can you easily warehouse any table or just the preset ones? So you covered that a little bit, but I want to dig deeper on that. So basically with the custom tables, every data source is different, but we make it so you can always pull whatever tables you need out of any data source.
Yes, exactly. So now that I've synced and stored this data, I can see here that Grow is now working in the background to queue up all of these tables of data with new data. So while we wait, I'm actually going to go over to another data source where I've actually already warehoused all of this Salesforce data, so you can see what it looks like once it's finished. So here we go. This is my Salesforce data once it's already populated. So you can see here that I have each of these tables of data with their name, again, how many rows of data we're storing for you, how big that data actually is, when it last updated, and how frequently this is going to update. So by clicking on any one of these rows, you can actually go to a management page for each of these warehouse tables. So here's accounts. There's some neat tools here that allows me to manage this. So I can add a description, active accounts, and it saves that. I can go here and sync or unsync this specific table. So without having to go back to that manage connection flow. Obviously I still want this on. I can even reset the refresh rate. This one I probably want a little bit more frequent. Let's go to 3 hours. And finally, down here below, you get a quick preview of the data that is in this table without having to jump into any of the builders. Again, if you want to see all of your warehouses that we're storing for you, you can come back over here to the left-hand nav and click warehouse and see all of the warehouse tables that we have storing for you. Clicking into any one of these takes you right back to this management page.
Looking at that refresh rate, Jason, customer had a
Yes.
question, is API throttling a part of the data warehouse? It's been a problem, like for example, Harvest has a really slow API. How do we handle that with the warehouse?
Yeah, so for the warehouse, what we're doing is we're going out and fetching that data, and we are adhering obviously to those API rate limits. And so we fetch that data as quickly as that API will allow us to. And because it's doing that behind the scenes with you going ahead and working on whatever you need to, that data now is in Grow. And so when you try to access that data within the builder or on dashboard, the data within the warehouse is immediately available. All right, good question. Now let's go back over here and look at data capacity. So again, just to recap, you saw this in the keynote, but these are the 9 data sources that are currently supported on Grow's data warehouse as of today. We started with these 9 data sources because they were the most problematic and most used for getting all of their data into Grow. So before the warehouse, and this gets to that question, many customers had to limit the amount of data they pulled into Grow for these data sources because of the strict API rate limits or because of data capacity constraints. But with the warehouse, you can now successfully pull all of the data for those data sources into Grow, and we actually make getting all of your data the default experience. And by having all of your data in Grow, you can unlock the full power of the new Data Explorer builder, as well as dashboard level filtering features that Juliet will show you in the second workshop. Now, additionally, we have over a dozen data sources in early testing to get it onto the warehouse. So please reach out to your account manager if you would like to help us test some of these data sources. And finally, we plan to add, like Josh said in the keynote, all of our native data source connections to the warehouse throughout 2021, making the warehouse the default experience moving forward in Grow. Now let's talk about performance. So Grow currently pulls data directly from the API into a data set or metric. Usually this experience is okay. However, this often means you have to wait on that API, and waiting times can be wildly inconsistent from as little as a few seconds to sometimes a few hours. So with the data warehouse, Grow does all that waiting for you. The warehouse fetches that data behind the scenes so you can continue working. When you jump into the builder or update a dashboard, that data is immediately available from the warehouse. So your dashboards update more quickly and building a metric is much faster. Finally, the warehouse is a foundation for growth. When we began building the warehouse, we knew it was going to be a critical foundation to empower our users with key new functionality. These include external access to the warehouse, like Brent told us in the keynote, also piping third-party data into Grow, and historical snapshots. So what does this mean? External access to the warehouse will allow you to pull your warehouse and dataset data into tools like Python and RStudio to do things like predictive analytics. Opening up the warehouse to third-party data providers will expand the number of data sources you can natively use within Grow. And finally, historical snapshots of your data will allow you to answer questions like, what did our sales funnel look like this same period a year ago, and how did that compare to where we're at now? So keep an eye out for those features coming in 2021. Great, building your data sets. So now that we have our data warehoused and Grow, let's see how to get that data into the builder. Then we can take that data and use powerful new features to prepare our verified data sets. So let's first look at how to pull data, warehouse data into the builder. So I'm going to come back over here to Grow, and I'm going to come to a data set that I've already created. So Salesforce leads all time. And just as a note, all of this data is actually dummy data, so don't worry, you're not seeing anyone's actual addresses and information. So I can see here in this data set that I am pulling directly from my Salesforce through this what's called direct query. With this data source that is now being warehoused, this new switch appears here in the builder on data settings. So I can see that I'm pulling in leads data for the last 2 years. In order for me to switch this over to the warehouse, all I have to do is toggle over to the warehouse, find my leads data, click get data, and pull that data straight into the builder. Now, in this case, I also have some transforms that are pulling very specific columns. So I'm going to run that transform and get that data working again. So with the warehouse, we wanted to follow best data practices when it comes to structuring the data. So in many instances, all you'll need to do is swap out the underlying data from direct query to the warehouse, just like we did. However, in some cases, you will have to adjust your transforms to account for those changes to the data structure of some of these warehouse tables. And that's how you get warehouse data into the builder. So let's move on to some of the next piece of the transforms and the 2 new report types. And one of our core principles when designing our tools is to replicate the power analysts get from using SQL, but without having to actually write it. We're always looking for how to give the analysts the power they need and still maintain the simplicity and ease that everyday business users need. So I'm excited to introduce those 5 new tools to you right now. So let's get started with the multi-join and union all. So for multi-joins, when you join data, you are adding additional columns to a table of data. This is because you want to add more information, also called dimensions, to existing records. So let me show you an example. So here I have my warehoused data for my Salesforce. Again, I have my 3 objects. I have my accounts object, my opportunities object, and my users object. And I want to combine all of this into one single data set that allows me to have all of my deals information with firmographic data from the accounts table, as well as information about the owner, an internal owner for each of those deals. So I'm going to look at all of these. Before, I would have to actually add individual join reports for each one that I wanted to join. But with the new multi-join tool, I can add this all in one report. So let's start with the opportunities table. And I'm going to find the account ID. And the first table I want to add to this is that firmographic data from the accounts table. So that's report 1 and ID. So I can run this right now, and this is how the join tool worked before, and where you would only be able to join just those 2 tables. But now with this additional join, I can take the result of those 2 tables and join another report. So here I'm going to look for owner ID. And all of my owner information is in that third report, the users table, and use my ID column to join that together. Now I can run this report and get all of that data into one report here in Grow. So just to kind of show you really quickly, I'm going to add a select column transform so we can pull out some specific information from all 3 tables. So I'm going to get the created date for the opportunity. I'm also going to get our company name from the accounts table, stage name from the opportunity table, the amount that each deal is worth, and finally, let's just get the name of the owner. So let's run this. And so what we're going to see here is all 3 tables of data all joined in one report using the new multi-join report tool. So that's multi-joins. Now let's look at the union all.
Before you go to the union all, Jason, I have a quick question from the audience. So the question is direct query. It has some limitations, right? And so can you go into a little bit more detail on the limitations between direct query and the warehouse? For example, direct query is slower because it pulls directly from the API, et cetera.
Yeah, so direct query pulls directly from the API. Additionally, like I showed you before, you have multiple parameters, which right now allows us to actually pull some of that data back. So a lot of customers will find that if there's too much data, they'll have to restrict how much data they can actually pull into Grow by filtering down what data they actually have. But like I said, with the new warehouse, by default, and the way we were even able to use and create that toggle UI and simplify it to that degree is because we default to pulling all of your data. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it did. And then the other question is like the reason why direct query is slower, right, is because whenever you go to the dashboard, then we start pulling the data. With warehouse, so we're pulling every hour, 12 hours, the data is already there when you want to start. So it is a lot quicker via the warehouse.
Yes, exactly. Great question. So let's look at union all now. So when you union data, you are adding additional rows, also called records, to an existing table of data. You usually do this when you already have all of the dimensions or columns of data that you want. You need to add more records to make the table complete. So let's look at an example. So let's say here I have some e-commerce data for sales that I've made. So in this particular case, I've got some, and again, this is dummy data, but I have some data from Shopify, from my Shopify USA store. And this one is from my Australia Shopify store. And this is a use case we see quite often, where you want to get multiple stores into one report so you can do an overall revenue data set. Additionally, I have here USA Magento. So this was from our sales from when we were using an older platform before we transitioned to Shopify. So let's get all of this data into one report. Before, with unioning, you would have to add a master SQL report and write out that SQL all by hand. But now, with the new union all report, you can get all of this into one report using this simple tool. So let me show you how easy this is. Let me get report 1. And you can see that by pulling this first report in, I get a list of columns at the top that I can edit. I actually like all of the names here, so I'm gonna just leave that alone. Then I see all of the columns, names, and their data types here in this first row for report one. So like I said, with a union, we're stacking tables on top of each other. So let me get the next one, report two. Now you see here that Grow is being intelligent and pulling in and matching different columns by name if it can find an exact match. However, some things don't match exactly, and so we're not including them automatically. This is because I moved from Magento to Shopify, so they have a different naming structure. So I know that the company for Shopify is actually named. So I'm gonna match that column up. And for date, it's actually processed at. So I'll match that column up. And amount is actually total. And now my new Shopify store doesn't actually have a reference number, so I'm not going to include that. But I still might want to use that reference number later, so we'll still keep that as a column. And finally, let's do the same with report three, those exact same columns. And now that I have everything stacked and looking good, let's run and get all of this data into one report. There we go, finished. All 17,500 rows of data all join in a single report. Now I can save this and verify this data set for others to use within Grow. And that's union all. Now let's go through the three new transforms that we have that were for Grow 6. That's the Array Expander, JSON Explorer, and time shifting transforms. The Array Expander transform breaks out values into new rows of data. So arrays are often used when you have what's called a one-to-many relationship, and breaking those values out into their own rows is useful when you need to join or do some analysis on those. So let's take a look at an example. So here I have some HubSpot data, and again, this is dummy data, but this is a common use case that we see with HubSpot. So this is HubSpot deal data. And now every deal can have multiple contacts associated with the deal, as we see here in this far right column. And if I want to do some kind of analysis or report that combines our contacts table to our deals table, having all of these contact IDs in an array makes it extremely hard, if not impossible, to join these two together. So all I have to do is get each of these contacted IDs into their own row. Previously, this would require some pretty unique SQL that is not very intuitive. So let's add a transform, and I'm going to come down here and click Array Expander. And I'm going to call this column the same thing as it was before, contact IDs. And obviously, the column I want to break out is contact IDs. I'll run this column, and it breaks everyone out. I'm going to sort this data really quick so you can see this and how it works. So here I have deal ID 1, with both of those contacts broken out onto each of their own rows. So now with this data is ready for me to go pull in my contacts table using our new multi-join tool and join those tables together. And that's the Array Expander. Now let's look at JSON Explorer. So JSON data structures are often used to store a lot of related data in one column. The JSON Expander breaks out the values nested in that JSON into new columns of data. So again, let's take a look. So here again, I have my data from my Salesforce accounts table that I'm warehousing. And as you can see, Salesforce took all of my address information and nested it in this JSON structure. So I have in one column all of my information associated with the address all combined into this JSON. But I need to do analysis on, I want to see how many accounts do I have by state, or even by zip code or city. And so in order to do that, I have to pull this data out into its own column. But previously, you'd have to use JSON selectors in a SQL statement, which are fairly unintuitive. And so with this new JSON Explorer tool, I can do that fairly easily. So what I've done is I created three new columns. This column is called city. I'm pulling this data from the billing address column, and the field that is associated with the values that I want is called city. So I can see down here that this is the city, and I want to pull out this Oklahoma City or Baton Rouge or Portland into its own column. So by setting this up and clicking run, it adds 3 new columns here to the end of my data. So cities broken out into its own column, state, and zip code. Now this data is ready for me to group, filter, and do other forms of analysis on now that it's pulled out of this JSON. And that's the JSON Explorer. Next is time shifting. So time shifting, working with timestamps is really tricky due to time zones. We frequently seen that timestamps are recorded in a time zone other than the one that you want to be reporting in. And this can lead to data discrepancies that are where the data is just slightly incorrect, but enough so that you're reporting incorrect data. So using the time shifting transform allows you to adjust all of those timestamps back into their correct time zones. So as an example, right here, you can see I have a January 16th at 11:32 p.m. This 486 is associated with revenue for that day. However, this sale actually happened on January 17th at 1:32 a.m. And so we're associating revenue to the wrong day. So using the time shifting transform changes that. But let's actually take a look at this in the builder. So I'm actually going to create a brand new metric using a data set that I've had before, my payment log data set. Pulling all this data into Grow, I want to do, like I said, some revenue analytics. So I'm going to add a new data series. I'm going to click the amount column, and it pulls in all of my data. And then this is pretty detailed, so I actually want to add a week. And I actually only care about this quarter. So I'm going to filter down to just this quarter. There we go. Now, this is revenue, so I want to format this data as currency rounded, and I want to show my values. There we go. So now I have my revenue, sum of revenue by week over time for this last quarter. But looking at this data, I can already tell that this data is a little bit off. This is 55,000 here, which is too much. I remember looking at a financial report and this data is a little bit too much. Last week at 142,000, that makes a little bit more sense. But I know that each of the 3 previous weeks were all closer to 150,000 and they were pretty flat. Looking into the data, I can tell and see that all of my dates here are actually being stored in UTC, but I'm in Pacific Standard Time. So let me come over to the data tab, and I'm going to add our new time shifting transform. I'm going to click that date column, and I know Pacific Standard Time is 8 hours behind UTC. So before I click run on here, I want you to take a look at this metric down here. And when I run, all of my dates will slightly shift. All my data. Great, let's look at this again. Great. Yep, that's closer to the 48K that I thought it was, the 142. And like I said, the 3 previous weeks were all closer to that 150,000. And that's time shifting. So
quick
let's
question,
just do a quick
Jason.
recap. Yeah.
So we have a few questions about the array expander and one about JSON Explorer, and quite a few people are stoked about the JSON Explorer. So I told them that Jason loves
Great.
JSON, so it'll be great. But here's the 2 questions. What happens when JSON has multiple rows? And on the array expander, does a list have to be brackets or words separated with commas are enough to use the transform? So let's do the JSON first. What happens when JSON has multiple rows?
Yes. So we didn't show that as an example, but you can actually add child fields. So by adding an additional field, you can actually dig into multiple levels of JSON here. So if it is nested multiple levels, you can still do that and pull that data out. And then in terms of the structure of data, so right now the array transform requires that your array is actually within brackets in order for the array transform to recognize it as an array and break that out. And then for the JSON Explorer, same thing, it would need to be in curly brackets for it to recognize as a JSON, a valid JSON, in order to like dig into that one as well. These are great questions.
Then I have another one about the time zone. One of the questions is there a way to identify the time zone of the data source easily? And unfortunately, that one's not super easy, but take a crack at that one.
Yeah, so identifying the time zone of the data source is not very easy. So frequently we see this with someone pulling in from a database. Like hopefully with your own database, you'll know exactly what time zone the times are being stamped in. For a lot of other APIs, so like with Shopify or Salesforce, and you can do a little bit of Googling and find out what time zone those are in. So I know like Salesforce will store their timestamps in your account settings. So you can set on your account settings within Salesforce what time zone your dates are stored in. With Shopify, I know they're in Canada, closer to the East Coast, and so they store all of their data in Eastern Standard Time. And so you'll just have to do a little bit of Googling to find out exactly what is like the dates and or the time zones that these dates timestamps are being stored in. But hopefully you'll be able to find that pretty quickly.
We're also working
Good
to make
question.
that easier, and we have a big help article about that. So we'll send out that help article as well. It's a great question. Unfortunately, it's not super easy. One more question is sometimes different data sources have different time formats. Is there a way to make those consistent?
Yeah, so usually, so with the new architecture that we've kind of built out, when we pull in your data, we recognize close to 20,000 different time stamp and date formats. And we automatically shift that into this particular timestamp with it's a year, month, day, space, hour, minute, second time frame or format. And so most of these formats, as they come into Grow, will actually be adjusted to be this consistent format. But yeah, we recognize close to 20,000 different permutations of dates and timestamps. And so if you run across any that we haven't, please let us know.
And then another question. We got a lot of great questions here. Keep them coming. We love this. So the question is, can time shifting be done over months? For example, moving forward revenue by 1 month to bill a receipt of payment, for example.
Yeah, the answer to that one is no. So time shifting transform is only for hours to shift time zones. So right now, the only way it works is by moving up to your 23 hours. That's a good question.
Okay, I'm looking for more questions about this section. I think we're good. Let's keep going. Keep those questions coming. We love these.
Awesome. These are great questions. So let's just recap everything that we have talked about then so far. So we have these 3 new powerful transforms, the array expander, JSON Explorer, and time shifting transforms. So you can do even more, but without having to use SQL. We have these 2 new report types, multi-join and union all, so that you can easily get all of your data into one report. And then finally, we've talked about the benefits related to this new architecture and this new way to connect and warehouse your data inside of Grow. So now that you have all of your you've warehoused all of your data inside of Grow, and you've used the data set and these new tools to prepare your data sets and verify them. And you can now take those data sets and that data and take advantage of these powerful new features like the Data Explorer and dashboard filtering that Julia is going to go over in just a moment. So back to you, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. So yeah, so we're super excited about the data warehouse, and like we said, it's on your account right now. We hope you check that out and reach out to Jason or our support team with any questions.